Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are. My name's Andre. I'm a compulsive overeater and I weigh and measure 3 meals off the grey sheet. I write them down, commit them to my sponsor, and I don't eat in between no matter what. And I make abstinence the most important thing in my life each day. So I was asked to do this. Thank you for asking me. I've already done one grey sheet meeting today at home on my laptop, but I arranged my day around doing this because this is important. So my wife and my daughter are off spending money, and I'm sat here saving it. And I'm abstinent, and I'm surrounded by restaurants. I'm surrounded by old smells, but I'm also looking around without being judgmental. But I can see why I'm doing what I'm now doing because I don't want to be how I used to be, and I used to be very unwell, and I was dying. I was dying from this illness, and if I go back to the beginning, food was a very big part of my life from a very early age, and I used to steal out of my grandmother's fridge various items that were sweet. That was the start of it. And my mother and father were separated when I was quite young. So when I used to when I saw my father at the weekend, it was at my grandmother's house, the house where I stole. And he was probably an alcoholic. And he would come home from the pub and he would gorge. And I would sit with him and I would gorge with him because it's what we did. I grew up in pubs. My mum ran pubs from the age of about 5. Alcoholism, addiction, and many other forms of dysfunction. Uh, and food became my friend, along with television and Lego. So I had addiction or obsession from a very, very young age. Um, I had a disease in my hip when I was a young child, and I spent very long periods of time in hospital with a plaster cast from my right foot right up to the chest, and I was immobile. And while I was in that uh, position, not only was I fed by the hospital, my paternal grandmother, she used to bring food to me. And the food she brought to me was food that I used to eat when I was at her house. I can't name the food, but it was food that I loved. And it was savoury, and it was what I ate. And it's what, towards the end of my old way of life, I wasn't binging so much on the sweet stuff because I became abstinent 4.5 years ago from sugar. But it was all of the savoury stuff that was killing me. And that really does hark back to when I was a boy. But I moved around a lot because of my mum's job. And my name's Andre, and I grew up in London. And I remember there was this girl called, her name was Tracy, and I met her out the back of one of the pubs that my mum ran, and she asked me what my name was, and I told her my name was Dave. And I was about 5 or 6 years old when that happened. So at 5 or 6 years old, I already felt different with a name like Andre, and I wanted to tell people I was Dave because I fitted in, or I felt like I fitted in. So that the feeling different started from a very young age as well. The eating started from a very young age. The moving around started from a very young age. The fear started from a young age. And I had an alcoholic stepfather from the age of 5 that used to drag me around by my hair, but he paid the bills, so that was okay, apparently. But yeah, I was terrified in my own home. Um, my mum eventually, I don't know if she sacked him, or sacked him off, but he left anyway. And I was sent to boarding school, and I was sent from being a core blimey governor, steak and chips Londoner that I am, to a school in Hertfordshire in the country that was full of hooray Henrys with posh accents. I already felt different, but now I really was different. When I was at school, I wanted to be at home because I was different. And when I was at home, I wanted to be at school because of the violence and the alcoholism and the addiction. So wherever I never felt safe. I never felt like I fitted in. And bit by bit, my father used to call me Little On. So that's what I call the little fella inside me. I'm trying to take care of him now. And Little On went withdrawn. I couldn't study when I was at school because my head was just spinning, what I now understand to be washing machine head that I learnt from the mothership. But I just couldn't concentrate. I was just so into self. And, it didn't mean that, I was into self like the way that sometimes it's spoken about in the rooms. I was a child. I didn't, children are selfish. It's their natural state. Being unselfish, I believe, is meant to happen as you grow up, when you start to find out about the world around you. But that's taken 40 years for me to actually open up to some of that, and it's taken a long time in recovery. But I was sent to this boarding school, and I used to binge at boarding school during break time. I would go to the tuck shop and I would get half a dozen of these particular sweet bars that came in wrappers, and I would go into the toilets and I would smash them down my throat, barely chewing them. And then I would be out of the game in the afternoon in some sort of hyperglycemic kind of, just zoned out. And then I never really achieved much at school because I couldn't study. I left school, and very, very quickly I became alcoholic. I am alcoholic. And my drinking, it masked the food because I couldn't afford to live normally, and I was unable to live normally. So, I had a six-pack when I was in my early 20s, but it wasn't because I was fit and training. It was through malnourishment and homelessness, and all my money went on the other stuff. And I was homeless for a period of time, and where that kind of life took me was into the basement of homeless hospitals, having the shit kicked out of me and being held against my will by gangs of drug dealers and things like that. That's where my illness has taken me. And but in amongst all that, there was the homelessness, and there was the starvation and the malnutrition. And I swore to myself, if I ever get out of this shit, I'm never going to go hungry again. And when I got sober, I made sure I was never hungry. I got sober in August of 2002. In December of 2003, January of 2003, I stopped smoking cigarettes. And that's when the food really, really launched. And I'll tell you, I weighed approximately 9.5 stone. What's that, about 100, just 140? It's about 130 pounds in American money. And I soared up to 277 pounds. That's the heaviest that I've achieved. I was actually trying to get to 20 stone or 280. No, I said that when I hit that weight, I would do something about it. I think I went over, but I was finally 12 steps into Overeaters Anonymous originally, and I got abstinent from sugar in there. But the bit I think of is the bit in the book where it talks about the little boy whistling in the dark. Anything he would do anything to have a few drinks he sees others taking with impunity. I would have given anything to eat the way I wanted to eat, but I was desperately holding on. And I lost about 4.5 stone, about 50 pounds, say, in OA. I wasn't hangry like I'd always been, but there was a dissatisfaction. The dissatisfaction with my sobriety, with my abstinence. And my abstinence, it was very, very loose. It wasn't defined properly. The sponsorship, I'm afraid, was, well, it isn't the kind of sponsorship that I would now deliver to another. I used to email my food, and there was no response to it. There was no questions about it. There was no advice about it. It was crap. And they used to pass this book around in OA that they used to call it the We Care book, and I used to call it the We Don't Effing Care book. Because I put my name down in it, and I'd never get a call from anyone. I used to reach out all the time, and I got nothing back. So it was a bag of spanners, as far as I'm concerned.
Five
And
5 minutes left, Andre. 5.
Thank you. But what happened to me? So I put on all the weight. I became type 2 diabetic. I ended up with a waist of med for high blood pressure, on meds for high cholesterol. I was 12 stepped in McDonald's in Farnborough in Hampshire by my now sponsor, who was introduced to me by a friend from Alcoholics Anonymous. And this sponsor, what the sponsor did was, they told me how shit it was. And it reminds me of how Dr. Silkworth told Bill, don't preach at them, tell them how bad it was, Bill. And that's what this person did. They told me how shit it was. They told me about what I suffered from. And the really excellent thing about Grey Sheet is it relates to my alcoholism, because I have a physical reaction to carbohydrates, to sugars, to grains, and to starches. When that was explained to me, instantly I was in the room and I knew what you were talking about, because I understand the physical phenomenon of craving with regards to my alcoholism. So I was instantly sold on the idea, but I was cautious because of previous experience. But 2 months later, I met this person at the North Sea Convention of Alcoholics Anonymous, and they asked me how I was. And my words were around kind of, I'm fucked on carbs, excuse me. And they said to me, of course you are. And they were kind to me. 2 months later, I called that person, and they've been my sponsor since, and I've been abstinent since. 4 months ago today was the last day of my eating the way I used to eat. And since then, I've been weighing and measuring and committing my food on a daily basis. And I'll give you the scores on the doors so far. I'm the lowest weight I've been in over 20 years already. My blood pressure has dropped 30 off the top, 30 off the bottom. My waist is now, I can squeeze into a 32, but I'm comfortable in a 33-inch waist. I've gone from triple XL tops to this top here I'm wearing, I think is a large, but I've got mediums ready to go. I've started buying clothes because I'm not embarrassed about how fat I am anymore. I actually look good, which is really nice. The first time I started to wear clothes, I cried when I saw my shape in the mirror, because I have quite a nice masculine V back, and you can see it from the front if you're in front of me, and it's started to come back. I actually feel like a man again. My mind has cleared so much. I have such clarity. I have such gratitude for GreySheeters Anonymous. It's incredible. I do more in Grey Sheet than I do in AA. I walked away from another fellowship because it was just too mad. And this is more important. Living is more important than being a martyr and just staying around to help others. I have to help me or I'm useless. And
2 minutes, Andre. 2
minutes. What else? What else can I say? No matter what I've had. I've sat in stadiums twice with 80,000 people eating a Grey Sheet compliant lunch. I've travelled on holiday to Gran Canaria and sat in buffet-style restaurants, walking around, checking out what's on offer, weighing and measuring at the counter. Had everyone watching me walking back and forward to my table as I make sure I've got all my food before I start eating. I came out today. I brought my lunch with me because I knew I'd be out. I've made phone calls. Yesterday I made a phone call because there's a particular thing that's a mix of condiments that has to be weighed and measured. And when I weighed and measured it, I was tired, and I left out 2 parts of it. So yesterday I called my sponsor and I said, I need to make a change. I've forgotten to put these items in my dressing. That's the level of honesty that I'm trying to practice in this program. Because the thought came, oh, you'll be fine, you're allowed to eat it. 1 minute, thank you. But I know that as soon as I put something in my mouth that I'm not supposed to, my head is going to just go into World War III on me, and it's going to start on me. You're a waster, you're useless, you're dishonest. There's no point calling, you're going to go back to day one. Everyone's going to think you're a waster and you're useless, you've left it all up. There's no point in going back, sod it, I'll go to the curry house. I'll be honest. I'll be as honest as I can be. I've made mistakes. I've owned up to my mistakes. I do my best to call others. I call my sponsor every day. I try and call people that are fewer days than me. I call people that are more days than me. I try and ask questions to make the call a bit more relevant, just chatting shit, because it just goes nowhere. I like to have a bit of a structure about the phone call, because otherwise I start rambling like I am now. I used to do chairs and I could go for an hour, but 15 minutes is probably just enough to get the message across. Thanks for having me. God bless.